Well, you guys are so quiet, and it's 4:59, but we might as well go ahead and get started. What do you say? So, this semester or quarter in here, we're talking about worship and song, and most of the classes are going to be doing a lot of singing, but tonight and Wednesday night are a little bit different. So, if you don't like tonight and Wednesday night, you can come back for the other ones because it's going to be very different than this one. But Jim was talking to me about this class, and I mentioned that I had done some research. I've done music for most of my life. I've studied it and taught it, and I put together some information about music that I think is very fascinating. And for Christians, it's relevant to increase and boost our faith in the God who has created this world. And when we look at another piece of his creation and study what it does, and especially since it's music and sound, and we use those things in worship. And so we thought, hey, well, why not put that together in this class and talk about it? So we aren't going to be singing a song tonight, but I hope that what we're going to talk about will be interesting to you and something you can take with you. I think also what we're going to talk about tonight is not something that a lot of people are aware of. I know I was in music for a long time and wasn't even fully aware of it. So I hope that's the case. And I hope also that you will participate with me because I'm going to be looking for a lot of feedback. I'm going to be trying to look at your faces and see what's going on inside there. And if you have questions, please stop and ask. If something is confusing, please raise your hand and ask a question. I would really love that because it'll help me refine how I'm communicating this. Because we are going to get a little bit technical, slightly technical about sound. Because if you stay too much on the surface, you don't get the good stuff. So you have to be a little bit technical so you can roll back the curtain just a little bit. So the title is on the slide, Music to My Ears, the Divine Majesty of Sound and Hearing. And I do think sound and hearing does show our Father's majesty in a unique way. Let's begin with a prayer, if we would. Father, thank you for this evening that we can gather as your people. And thank you for the evidence that you have left of your majesty and eternal power all around this world. And please help us tonight as we look into a part of it, that we will appreciate even more the powerful and awesome God that you are. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, just to kind of get us going here, you guys know who Isaac Newton is. I heard of Isaac Newton, one of the most famous physicists ever. Well, back in the 1700s, many of those guys, they looked at the world as God's creation. And their perspective of the world actually motivated them to research and discover things about the world because they believed there was order to it. And Newton is probably one of the most famous, and in terms of influential and impact, the way that we see the world. But he wrote this: how came the bodies of animals to be contrived with so much art? And for what ends were there several parts? Was the eye contrived without skill in optics? And the ear without knowledge of sounds? And these things being rightly dispatched, does it not appear from phenomena that there is a being, incorporeal, living, intelligent, omnipresent? So he's asking a bunch of rhetorical questions, right? How does this all come to be if there's not a being who is intelligent and omnipresent? And here he mentions the ear, and the ear. How can the ear be contrived without knowledge of sounds? How can how can you develop a system to receive something and if you don't know anything about that? Right? How can you develop an auditory system to interpret sound if you don't know anything about sound? That doesn't make any sense. And Newton sees that as he looks at life. And I hope we'll see that tonight too. And Romans chapter 1, verse 20, a very well-known passage, I think, to many of us. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. So what does this verse say that we can perceive from the things that have been made? Two things. You can shout it out. Eternal power and divine nature. So we can look at creation and we can deduce God's eternal power and divine nature. So as we're looking at all this tonight, consider that. Okay, we can see from the things that he has made, those two things. So that's one of my objectives tonight. I want to perceive clearly God's eternal power and divine nature by examining sound, in particular musical sound, and examining our system for perceiving musical sound, our auditory system, and I want to focus on that on Wednesday. Okay, so this is two-parter. It's 2 parts. Tonight we're going to look at sound itself, how it works, and then Wednesday, how our ears work. And I hope to inspire adoration for God's amazing gift of music. And particularly, it's interesting that God says to sing to him in worship, that we're supposed to use music, this thing that he has created. And for what has he created this? Why do you think he asks us to do that? Well, I think we understand a little bit more of that when we delve into it a little bit deeper with the knowledge that we have now with the technology and achievements that have been made. So, here's some questions I want to look at tonight. What is a musical tone? What is that? What does it mean if a tone is musical? Are all tones that you hear musical? Are all sounds that you hear musical? No. So what makes a musical sound musical? All right. Also, why do instruments sound differently? Even if they're playing the same note, right? They're both reading the same note on the staff, but a trumpet playing that note and a violin playing that note sound very different, even though they're playing the same pitch. Why is that? Well, there's an interesting answer to that, if you don't know. And why do some notes sound good together while others do not? And all these questions are really related. And then how do we hear this stuff and interpret it? And I'll just let the cat out of the bag. There's a whole lot that we don't know about this, about hearing, especially what happens in our brain. Okay, so our first question, what is a musical tone? Well, there's already, and we're going to pick off part of that answer right now, very simply. I hope you can see that. Okay. Now, on the left side is this sound. Let's see if you can hear it. Okay, what was that? Trumpet, yes. Okay, good. That was a trumpet sound. On the right, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this. Yes, okay, she said ice in a glass. It's glass breaking. It didn't come out very well on the speaker. Okay, thank you, Jeremy, for turning that up. Okay, so one of those you would consider to be a musical tone, right? Which one? The trumpet, okay, considered to be a musical tone. The one on the right, not so much. Now, if you look at, these are two-dimensional representations of the sound and something we call a sound wave. Now, if you just look at the two of those, do you see anything striking? There's symmetry. There's a pattern. You see discord on the right. So on the left, you see how there's a repeating pattern that repeats over and over and over and over. On the right, there's no discernible pattern there. So that's one of the answers already. That's part of the answer to what is a musical tone, is it's a periodic sound. And it'll look like that when you capture it in 2 dimensions. So it's something that repeats. Well, that already gives you some inclination, like, okay, human beings pick up on patterns, which we know that, right? But here we're already picking up on an aural pattern that you can't even see. And do you know that you're picking up on that when you hear trumpet sound? No. But you're already picking up on a pattern. And of course, these patterns are related to how the sound is produced. You know, a trumpet, anybody play trumpet in here? I got one back there. The mouthpiece, they're going, that's what they're doing inside the trumpet. So their lips are opening and closing really fast, sending spurts of air, which is creating, and it's doing it consistently, regularly, which makes sense that we would see a pattern like that, right? Because it's consistent. Whereas glass breaking, there is nothing like that. Okay, so that's part of the answer. But that's not the entire answer by any means. So there's this repeating pattern. It's a periodic waveform. Now, we need to learn a little bit more about sound, talk about a couple of concepts that I think you probably are somewhat familiar with, but I want to make sure we know what these are. We're going to talk about sound a little bit more so we can delve a little bit deeper. So right here, how is sound produced? How do you make sound? Anybody know? Some vibrations, right? You've got to displace air. Now, in the air, we know air is not empty. right? That's space. But our air is full of oxygen molecules and all kinds of other stuff in the air. And so when you displace that air, there's a wave that starts. And that's what the top picture is showing up here. It's demonstrating. And if you think of that left red thing as being maybe a guitar string, so when you pluck that string, the string is moving back and forth, right? And every time it's pushing the air and smashing molecules together. Well, when molecules get smashed together, they don't stay there. They then spring apart. And then that makes them smash into the next door molecules, and then they spring apart and smash into the next one. So you get a wave that travels across the molecules in the air. It's very similar to dropping a stone in the water. The ripples continue. That's happening in the air. We just can't see it, right? So that's the picture at the top. And then the red dots that are on there, those are just showing you individual molecules. The molecules don't travel. They just kind of move a little bit left to right. They don't travel. Energy is traveling across the molecules, and so that's what that's showing. Now, the bottom picture is our two-dimensional representation of this energy that's being moved across. Because, of course, it's doing this, out three dimensionals. We can't manage that. We need a two-dimensional representation of it. And so we have these crest and trough. So the top of the crest is where it's squished together, and then the trough is where it's the most far apart. And then, of course, it's crossing a point in between those two things every time. And so I really like that visual because I think it's helpful to see how the three-dimensional aspect translates into a two-dimensional one. Anybody have a question on that? Is this familiar? Can you nod your head or do something that's familiar? Okay, thank you. All right, so now out of that we get two terms. There's two main terms that we want to know. One is frequency down there at the bottom, frequency. And that's probably a word that you've heard. But it's how many times does it do the squish and the part come apart and come back to like stationary? So one cycle all the way up, all the way down, and back to the middle is a cycle. And so how many times is it doing those cycles per second is the frequency measured. So if it's 200 cycles per second, it's doing that 200 times per second, right? Really fast, really fast. Okay, so that's over time. Frequency is a time measure. And then amplitude is the other one. How vigorously is it doing that 200 times per second? So if it's 200 cycles per second, is it a small one, or is it vigorously doing that? Okay, those are the two things, two terms that we need to know, frequency and amplitude. Those are probably somewhat familiar as well. So, frequency, cycles per second, which in physics we have a measurement called hertz. You've probably heard that before too. And this is what we perceive from frequency is pitch. So this gets into our discussion between things that you can measure in the world, and in this case, physics, right? You can do physics measurements. But how we perceive those physics is something entirely different. That's psychoacoustics, which sounds like what the crazy people are going to do. Psychophysics. No, but psychophysics is how we psychologically perceive things in the physical world, which with sound is very interesting. So, but this frequency, 200 or whatever, we perceive as pitch. So if it's a higher frequency, then we perceive a higher pitch. So it's like going up higher on the piano. Push the notes on the piano higher and higher. Those are higher frequencies. You go lower the other direction, those are lower frequencies on the piano. All right? So that's what we perceive. Now, human hearing, we can hear a range around 20 hertz, 20 cycles per second, to 20,000 cycles per second. So we have a very wide range of hearing, but of course there are frequencies that exist outside that, like dog whistles, right? They can hear it, but we can't. It's outside of that range. And I've heard that elephants actually produce subsonic sounds that are below 20. They can produce those sounds. That's just trivia. But we have a wide range. Now, amplitude, we measure that in something called the decibels. That's a scientific measurement. And we perceive that as the loudness of the tone. Okay? All right, so frequency and amplitude. So if we know those, we can go forward with what I want to do, which is a little demonstration. with frequencies. And I've done this before, and afterwards somebody came up and was like, I loved what you did, but I didn't understand any of it. I'm like, well, all right, so I've switched it again. I'm going to try it again. So I hope this comes across and you get it. So we're going to play some frequencies, all right? And Jeremy's back there ready with the sound, and I want you to think about what you're hearing. So we're going to start with a frequency of 220. So let's listen to it and make sure we can hear it. And let's see, make sure the thing comes up. Now, I am controlling the computer back there. We had to come up with this really weird way to do all this. Jeremy, I'm not seeing the place to start it. There we go. If some of you are down there, that's too low. It's up here. Okay, so that's 220. Now, did you hear that very well? What, if you had to guess an instrument, what does it sound like? Okay, sort of sound like French horn. It was actually a computer. So let me play it again. Yeah, it does sound like an instrument in here. It doesn't at home. Can you turn it up, Jeremy? So it's just at 220. Now, one of the things I want to say about this is what I'm doing here is quite artificial, of course. A natural sound in the world does not have a single frequency by itself, which is something we're going to learn. So I'm artificially building something to make the point. But this is a 220 hertz sound that's pure tone that's generated by a computer, okay? And we know that we perceive this as a pitch, right? We sang it. That if you know the piano at all, it's an A below middle C. That's what it is, A3. Now, I'm going to play another pitch. Okay, this is 440. Okay, can you tell that's a different? Can you tell it's different? Okay, it doesn't sound like the other one. Now, something you might already know. If you look at those two numbers, what's the mathematical relationship between those? It's double, okay? And in music, not in science, but in music, we call that an octave. So those of you familiar with that, an octave has a mathematical reason behind it. Now, I'm going to play these two notes together, all right, at the same time. Do you hear? Do you hear two? I'm playing, how many frequencies are we playing? Two. Did you hear two pitches? Some of you are like, okay, you heard one. Okay, you heard two. Okay, with two, it's a little bit easier to hear both of them. Now, I'm going to go to the third one. Okay, here's a 660. And you can calculate the math, the relationship on your own. Everyone's like, oh, torture. I'm sorry. And I can't stop it. All right, so when that's over, yeah, Jeremy, if you are able to stop it back there, that would be helpful. It's the one next to the 660 over here. That one, yeah. Or just even let me stop it. Okay, now I'm going to play all three. So we've got three frequencies now that are all very different. Anybody have a question about them being different? Okay, now I'm going to play all three of them together. Can you make that show, Jeremy? Right there. Are you able to touch it? Touch the screen back there? the second one on the right, on the bottom. Yeah. Okay, this is all three together. I'm going to put another one. Let's see if it gets better. So this is definitely another pitch. I'll stop it so it doesn't torture you. All right, here's all four of these frequencies playing together. Can you hum it? If you had to hum it, what would you hum? You hear that? Now again, the stuff happening, the effects in this sound system are creating other issues. So this is something I'll have to remember for next time. The way it sounds at home is not the way it's going to sound in this large room. But some of you probably heard the other one kind of ringing too. I'm going to keep going. Can you touch it, Jeremy? There it goes. Okay, so that's even higher. Let's all five of these. Hum it. Now, is anybody freaking out yet? How many frequencies are we playing? 5. How many pitches are you hearing, really? You just hear one. You just hear one. Why are you only hearing one? What's wrong with you? Now, if I go down here and play the original one again, is it the same pitch? Yeah, it's the same pitch. But what's different? What's different about the sound? No, it's 5. I played 220 by itself. This is 220 by itself. Okay? And here's all 5 of these together. It has a different quality of sound. Would you agree? That's what he said. It's a different quality of sound. Now, did I say, does it sound beautiful to you? No, I'm not asking that. Just that that has one sound. This has a different sound. Right? But it's the same pitch that we're perceiving. Are you with me? All right, now I'm going to add another one. Okay, that's a higher one. If I can get this one to stop. Shush. Okay, here's 6. 6 frequencies altogether. Okay, here's the 7th one. What? Here's all 7 together. Here's the 8th one. Okay, you don't want to hear that very long. Here's all 8 together. Now, are you still here? Are you still hearing one pitch? Yeah, but how many frequencies are we playing? 8. Now, yes, there's depth, but the sound quality changed. Right? I'm hearing the same pitch, but it sounds like slightly different instruments might be playing it. Hopefully that came through on these figures in here. Is that interesting to anybody? That's like, what? What are we doing? Why is that happening? Why is that happening? You perceived all of these frequencies together as a single tone, which is still that A that's below middle C, which is A3 in the numbering system. Okay, so what is happening with all those other frequencies? Well, that is changing what we call the timbre, or the tone quality of the instrument. So all those other frequencies, 440, 660, 880, all those, being present, and at the amplitudes that they are, that changes what instrument it sounds like is producing that pitch. But it's the same pitch that we perceive. So let's talk about some terminology here. And why does this happen? We don't know, it just does. It just does. But what's interesting is there's a mathematical pattern. You know, we saw the repeating pattern earlier. Well, this pattern is even cooler because we've got, if you look at all these numbers here, you can see a pattern, right? And these are called harmonics. Also, overtones is a synonym, if you've heard that word. So in our complex tone, we had one pitch we were perceiving. There's actually lots of frequencies. The lowest frequency is called the first harmonic, and the next one's the second, third, fourth, so on and so forth. The first harmonic also is actually very special, so it has a special name. It's called the fundamental. It's called the fundamental because that's the one we perceive as the pitch. Even though there's all these other frequencies happening, we perceive the fundamental as the pitch that we would play on the piano or something. Now, what's the relationship? The second harmonic is 2 times the fundamental, right? The third harmonic is 3 times the fundamental. The fourth harmonic is 4 times, and so on and so on and so on. You get it. So you just multiply 4 times that to get the fourth harmonic. That pattern, that's a mathematical pattern, right? It's very clear. And in math, it has a name. It's called the harmonic series. So if you go to calculus and you study like the Taylor series and the whatever, you know, all these different series, different patterns that are out there, the harmonic series is one of them. And guess what? It appears in music. And guess what? Our ears pick up on it. Did anyone teach you to do that? No. You're born with it, folks. Babies come out of the womb and they can recognize music immediately without any training. Now, so far with what is a musical tone? It's a periodic vibration. It's repeating. Now, what we learned about a periodic vibration just now is a periodic vibration contains many frequencies, not just one. It's a complex tone, but the relationship of these frequencies are very specific. It follows a mathematical pattern called the harmonic series in that. And this is all what we hear as a musical tone. This is why we hear it as music. We perceive the fundamental frequency as the pitch. We perceive the rest of the frequencies as the timbre or tone quality of the instrument. Are you with me? That's amazing. Now, let's do a little bit more with this. Because so far, this has only been one pitch. Well, how much music do you listen to that only has one pitch in it? Boring, right? So that's not what we do. So we're going to add some more. Oh, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's take our pitch that we have so far, and let's mess with it. Because with technology today, that's what you can do. You can take something and you can mess with the frequencies in it and make a whole new sound that didn't exist before. Now, mine aren't going to be cool, so just don't even. All right, so don't even worry about it. But let's pretend these pink bars represent amplitudes. Remember, which is the loudness of each of those frequencies. So, and let's adjust them. So I'm going to take all of the odd ones and make them louder, and the even ones and make them less loud. Softer, okay? All right, so here was the original one a minute ago with all 8. Here's all 8 again, whoops, but with this adjustment. That doesn't sound very different in here. It wasn't that different to begin with. What was that? Now, I was trying to make it sound more like a clarinet. Does it sort of sound like a clarinet to you? Yeah, maybe. Because clarinets tend to favor the odd harmonics. They produce louder odd harmonics in their sound. So I was trying to make it sound like a clarinet. So whether or not that was successful, you can judge. Now, here's another version where I changed the amplitudes of the other frequencies. I made more of them louder into kind of a descending, kind of a step down. So that's this one. But can you hear that it's different? How would you describe the difference? It's kind of hard to describe. Well, it's not higher because the pitch is the same. It seems deeper. This one does this. I would see when you study music, you learn how to describe music. This is darker and this is bright and this is, we have all these terms and it's like it's very subjective. This one sounds more annoying, doesn't it? It's kind of, it's fighting, okay? But do you get the idea? So you can take a sound and you can adjust the frequencies in there and you can make a different sound, but it's still playing the same pitch. So this is why, again, a trumpet sounds different than a violin, which sounds different than a French horn, which sounds different than a singer, etc., because when they're all playing and singing in unison, even they are producing a different array, a different harmonic spectrum, each of them. And even if you take two male singers, do they sound exactly the same? No, because they each have their own unique harmonic spectrum that they're producing that follows the harmonic series. And somehow we just get it without even knowing that we're doing that at all. And we're like, how beautiful. Sounds so good. So what just happened? We discovered that when multiple frequencies are played together, whose relationships follow the mathematical harmonic series, humans perceive them as a single pitch. Scientifically speaking, this is a complex tone. To us, it's just, well, that's an instrument playing a single tone. Duh. I don't care. We discovered that changing the set of frequencies present will affect the timbre or tone quality, but not the pitch. So when we added 440, 660, we added them. We kept getting the same pitch, but the tone quality changed. And then we adjusted the amplitudes of those and got further changes, right? So now, here's something pretty cool. To re-emphasize this point even more, if I haven't emphasized it enough, that we can follow the harmonic series, that we are wired to pick up on this mathematical pattern in sound in the air. So you remember our original sound? Okay, now, stop. Okay, now I'm going to remove, watch the 220, I'm going to take it out. Now you remember which frequency do we perceive as the pitch? The 220, the fundamental. No, I've removed it. Okay, I've removed it. What do you think we're going to hear now? Is that a different pitch? It's not. I hear the same pitch. Let me put it again. This is all 8 with 220 in it. And then here is 220 removed. That's the same pitch. You're still hearing 220 hertz even though I took it out. Are you following? How are you doing that? What's wrong with you? How are you doing that? Good memory. No, you're hearing something there that's not there. You're hearing something that's not present. You with me? How do you think you might be doing that? I can tell you scientists don't really know, but we already kind of answered it, right? Your brain picks up on those sound waves, and it's like, oh, look, we have 440, 660, that mathematical pattern. Well, the fundamental's not there, but I'll just assume it is because I know the pattern. How does evolution explain that? How do you learn that? How do you mutate into doing that when you don't even know you're doing it? But so we can actually assume the fundamental even if it's not present in the sound because we're so hardwired to pick up the harmonic series. That's God. That's God that did that. And why? Why? What is the what would you say is the purpose of music? To praise God? Okay, think of it in general terms, like even in the secular world. Pretend, out of the religious context. Personal enjoyment, what? Express joy. Culture. Like we use it at ceremonies a lot, right? To inspire, to bring some kind of meaning to an event, to express emotion. I mean, this is a cross-cultural phenomenon. Every culture that we know of in the world, in history, has had music in it, which makes sense because we're so hardwired to do it. But the thing about music that's interesting is it's not necessary for survival. Singing is not going to bring the deer to you to kill it, right? It's not going to grow your food. I mean, there are some people that think that singing to plants can help, but okay? But it's not going to help you eat if you can sing. Believe me, I'm a starving artist. I've been one. I know. Right? You don't get along. But it's not going to help you survive. And so from an evolutionary perspective, they have to figure out, well, why did we even develop music? Because it's not necessary. And the whole thing about evolution is it's mutation, random mutation that gives you some kind of advantage that you can then natural selection works on it, and then that gets persisted. Well, why music? Because it doesn't help you survive. So they say it's just an offshoot. Well, language was important, so music just kind of came out of that. And it's a terrible explanation, like the rest of it. But music, going back to my original question, it's obvious that music is supposed to give us an outlet for expressing emotion. Because it's a universal experience. When we hear music, it affects us emotionally. And so, God programmed all of this for us to understand and hear music, this particular pattern, and be affected by it. And so I hope you see that even more clearly and more deeply by understanding just this simple idea. It's not simple, but... Okay, so this is a visual representation, just to throw some cool math kind of stuff in here. So the trumpet sound we heard a minute ago, this kind of looks like that a little bit, right? It had all the wigglies and squigglies. This is a complex tone because it's not simple looking. There's a lot of bumps. So, but what we're saying is a sound like that actually has more in it. And we have to give credit to Fourier. If you've heard his name, if you're a math person who's been in engineering or anything, you might have heard his name because he's influenced a lot of stuff. But he's the one that came up with the fact that this complex tone can be reproduced, can be explained by a bunch of other sine waves inside of that. And so if you think of what we just did, the 22440, that red line, see the F, the little chart on the left, the F, fundamental, that red line represents the fundamental. And it's a simple, much more simple looking, right? And it's the biggest because it's the slowest. The 220, it's the slowest. And then the next one, the dark blue, the 2 times the fundamental, you can see that one in there. You also see how the harmonic series lines up visually. They all go to 0 at the same point. They all line up. And we pick up on that. So this is the harmonic series, it's Fourier analysis, and this has impacts in a lot of other industries besides music. So Fourier said any periodic vibration, however complicated, can be represented as a combination of pure harmonic vibrations. Now remember, it's periodic vibrations. Something is repeating. It's not all sounds. It's these periodic ones. So one musical tone does not equal one frequency, one musical tone equals many frequencies, and he had already figured that out. And his discovery is what creates a lot of the foundation for all the digital music we have now and the things that we're able to do with computers. So I say that just to remember, they're always standing on the shoulders of giants who came before us, even though every generation thinks it's the smartest one that has ever lived. We always need to get a grip. Now, we've only listened to one pitch, so this is where I was going to go before, which that's not music. Music has got to have more than that. So let's do some more. You excited? So we have our original one on the left, right? All 8 of those together. One more time. Okay, now I'm going to add another set. Here's another set. Now these have decimals and funky because obviously I'm intentionally contriving this to be the way I want. But here's this one. I hit stop. Keep missing it. There we go. All right, here's this one. Here's this one. Here's this one. And you can trust me on the math, or if you want to pull out your calculator and do it. And here's the 7th one. And here's all of them together. I see some of you going, and I'm glad. I'm like, okay, it's getting through, right? Because you heard 7 different pitches, right? But when I played them all together, you heard 1, and you heard the bottom one. You perceive the whole thing as 277.2, and that's a C sharp. I'll just tell you that. It's a C sharp 4, like right on middle C, C sharp. Okay, now, can we hear both of them together? What do you think? So now we've got 7 frequencies and 8. So we have 15 frequencies. So now I've got them in nice columns. When they come to your ear, are they in nice columns? No. This is this, gloat of frequencies going at your ears, and you have to do something with it. So if I play this one, how many pitches do you hear? You heard 2 now. How many frequencies are there? 15. But your ear is organized, your brain, I should say. Your brain is organizing all of that. And be like, oh, that's lovely. Now here's another set. I'm not going to play them all. I got lazy. So but here's this whole set together. This is all 7 of these frequencies together. Okay, so now we've got 22, right? 22 frequencies. We're all going to start together. What? That's just a phenomenon. That's just how we're made. You heard a nice triad in there. I know you did. Which is what we sing all the time. It's a major chord. So, but there's 22 frequencies there. Now, some of the frequencies overlap. Did you notice that? On the left side, there's a 660 and a 1320, and over on the other one, there's a 660 and a 1320. So some of those will overlap and kind of strengthen each other, which, when we're singing chords and we're singing together, our harmonics are actually strengthening each other in terms of the sound, and it's part of what creates the richness and this idea of a chorus and lots around you, this richness in the sound. So it's all built in. Now, the other thing that's interesting is the relationship of 220 to 330. So even if you think about so we talked about the harmonic series within, and we put all those things together and combine them. Well, harmonic series is also what explains things that sound good together. So the 220 and the 330 are within a pattern of a harmonic series. If you started with 110, as the fundamental, what would the next one be? 220. What would the next one be? 330, 440, 550. Okay, so 220 and 330 have they're part of a harmonic series, right? So they have that relationship to each other. And so the things that we think are consonant sounding that sound good together are also explained by the harmonic series. So not only is a whole complex tone and our idea of different instruments explained by a harmonic series, but what we think sounds good together is also explained by a harmonic series, mathematically that way. So these are all the things we answered about musical tone. So I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. Why do some notes sound good together while others do not? It's really the same answer, the harmonic series. There's a couple things, though. There's one thing that's a little bit different. I've got 2 frequencies here that are very close together. You're not going to like this. Can't get it. Let me try the next one. All right, let me start with the other one. Can't get it. Are you guys seeing this? It's so hard to get. I should have put these further apart. That's my bad. Can you hear the wobble in it? The wobble. We'll explain a little bit why that is on Wednesday. But things that are too close together, frequencies that are too close together, they're far enough apart where we get this wobble, but not far enough that we can differentiate them too much. We don't like that. Okay, and then you guys are squinting. I know. Make it stop. I know. Make it stop. I can't get the things. Okay, it'll stop in a second. And also, generally, the frequencies within the first 6 elements of the harmonic series. So the 2 times the fundamental, the 3 times, the 4 times, the 5 times, anything that has that relationship to each other, we tend to think of those as consonant sounding good together. Well, what's interesting about that is that forms what we call a major triad. Anybody music theory? Well, major triads is like the foundation of 90% of the music that you listen to every day that you like. It's most of the hymns are in major keys and formed on major triads. And it's like that whole thing is baked into the universe, and it's baked into our brains to love major triads and major chords. Are you with me? Now, let me show you, let's just bring this home, okay? And then I'll let you go. So let's take this, what we sing in church all the time, right? This is something very similar. The basses, tenors, altos, sopranos, all singing notes together. Well, let's take this apart with what we know now. So the basses are singing a C, right? Well, we're hearing the pitch, which is 130 hertz, but they're producing a lot of other frequencies, right? They're producing all these other ones. They don't know it, but they are. They're producing all these other frequencies with certain amplitudes, and that defines the sound of the min. Because you're hearing the C, but you also know that it's the min because of all the other frequencies. So this is the one you're seeing as the pitch. The rest of it, you're saying, oh, that's the min singing. You got it? Now, the tenors are singing their G. Well, we'll perceive the pitch there, but then they're producing all these other frequencies too, which we perceive as the tenors singing it. We hear the pitch, we perceive the other men singing that one. Altos, same thing. We hear that pitch, they're producing a lot of other frequencies, and of course they go up higher than that. We perceive that as the women. And then the sopranos. Okay, you get the idea? And then let's put it all together. We have all of this happening at the same time, so how many frequencies is that? Well, we hear a lot more frequencies that I'm even showing up here because it's too high. We're hearing all that at the same time as this beautiful, rich chord, and we're parsing all through all of those frequencies together into, okay, this pitch, and this pitch, and this pitch, and this pitch, and the men, and the men, and the women, and the women. And then if we had instruments with it, we might have violins and trumpets and French horns and all this other stuff, and we can somehow parse through all of that and make sense of it because we're hardwired to get to the harmonic series in sound that we can't even see. Praise the Lord. I hope when you sing, you will think of the majesty and internal power that we are experiencing just by doing that. Thank you for your good attention.